All right, this is going to be my instructions on how to make the rice and ground beef dinner that my grandma taught me. The ratios are really, really easy. So this is a pound of ground beef. It can be whatever kind of ground beef, like 80-20, 85-15. This is 90-10, so it's a little bit leaner. Doesn't matter. You're going to do a pound of beef to every cup of rice. So if we have 1 pound of ground beef, we're going to use 1 cup of rice, dry rice. So we're going to cook it, and it's going to obviously grow a little bit in size. It'll be roughly 2 cups worth of rice at the end, but it's always 1-to-1. So pound of beef, cup of dry uncooked rice. You're also, same as the 1-to-1, you're also going to use 1 small onion per pound of ground beef that you have. It could be small to medium size. You can omit it. You don't have to use onion. You could use half of the recommended amount, but I usually do 1 small onion to 1 pound of ground beef to 1 cup of rice. If you wanted to make a lot, you could do 3 pounds of beef, 3 cups of rice, and 3 small onions. Next, garlic or jarlic. This is really, you measure with your heart, however much you want. I'll show you in the process where you actually add this and how you use garlic. You do have to be a lot more careful with garlic than what most people think in terms of how you cook it, because if you cook it wrong, it can get really bitter. The next is going to be our broth or stock that you're going to be adding in. For 1 pound of beef and 1 cup of rice, I would say use about half a cup of broth, and you may actually end up using a little bit more throughout the process, but this part is really about preference. It's about how watery or dry you want the final product to be, and I'll kind of show you how to judge that. Next thing is also going to be Parmesan cheese. This one also is personal preference. For this dish, I'm probably going to use like a decent sized knob of it, and I'll end up showing like how much I end up using and putting in the final product. This is going to be something that you add at the very end off heat, and you're going to fold it together. So this cheese does not go into any sort of pan while the heat is still on. You want to fold this in off heat. And the last piece of the puzzle here is going to be a complete seasoning mix or blend of whatever you like. This one is going to be the most traditional to sort of Brazilian, South American, even Latin American cooking. It's Badia Sazon Completa. I really like this one. It has everything that you could want in it. And I typically just stick to that. I mean, you can adjust salt a little bit towards the end, but really all you need to do in terms of prep work right now, obviously aside from cooking the rice, highly recommend you guys get a rice cooker. It makes life super easy. And for any form of rice cooking, I do 1 cup of dry rice to 1.5 cups of water. And that's going to be for any type of rice typically that you cook. It's 1 to 1.5 is usually the ratio that I use. But the only other prep work you really have to do is dice up the onion or cut it however you'd like. And then you got to shred the cheese, which is literally the hardest part. This is what takes the most time. Everything else is really, really simple. So from here, I'll kind of split up some videos of the cooking process. All right, so this is 1 cup of rice in the rice cooker. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and wash the rice. And so basically, it's going to be kind of hard to do this with one hand. You fill this up a little bit, at least until the rice is covered. Once the rice is covered, what you're going to do is you're going to get in there with your hand, and you're going to kind of like jostle it around a little bit. And you'll notice that what happens when you wash your rice is all of the like gross starch that it's been sitting in starts to come off. And you get this cloudy, almost kind of milky water consistency. And from here, you can either kind of do it a little bit risky and drain it off without using any sort of strainer or anything, or you can always grab a strainer. I'm just kind of used to doing it this way. You'll lose a little bit of rice, but it's really not enough to impact, the final amounts. I recommend, and most other people would recommend, wash the rice until the water runs clear. I would say that's a little bit much. You don't have to, maybe like rinse it through twice, right? So I just did, that was the first one. Now I'm gonna fill this up with water again. And I'm going to do that exact same process one more time. Okay, we have our cleaned and prepped rice. To this, I typically add about one good pinch of salt. This is before anything else goes in there. Grab a good pinch of salt, throw that in with the rice, and then we're gonna measure out the amount of water that we need. So this is 1 cup of rice, we're gonna use 1.5 cups of water. Okay, this is my measured out on the side, 1.5 cups of water. We're gonna add it to the 1 cup of washed rice with your salt. This goes in. One thing you can do just for consistency's sake is you'll notice just after washing, a lot of that rice will end up on the side of the bowl. Best way to do it is to kind of pick your bowl up, let the water get to those pieces, and they'll all float down together. From here, with a rice cooker, it's super simple. You literally just close it, and then you select. I usually just do quick cook on this one. I can send you guys this exact model. It wasn't that expensive. And then you just go ahead and hit start. That's all you have to do. This is gonna cook your rice in 30 minutes, and it'll be perfect rice, like the best type of rice that you could possibly get, and it comes out of this bad boy. All right, next step here is gonna be prepping your onion. Typically, what I do the same thing every time. When we look at an onion, you have the root end, and you have the top, which looks like a little button up here. The root, when you're cutting an onion, it's typically best to leave this intact. I know it looks gross. Leave it down there because the root is actually what's holding all of the layers of the onion together. So it makes it easier to cut, an entire half of an onion with the root still attached than if you just cut this ugly part off in the beginning. So I'm going to show you kind of how I prep the onion to be cut. First, I'm going to take off this top section here. All right, we're just taking a little tiny semicircle off the top. From here, I will flip it down onto its cut side so it's stable, it's not going anywhere. And I'm going to cut right through the root, parallel, right down the center of the onion. And as you can see, root is still attached, and we have 2 onion halves. From this point, I will peel off all of the gross skin that's on the outside, and you can even get away with peeling like that first top layer of flesh along with it. So if you see what I'm doing here, now it's super easy to peel this onion, and I just grab all that, pull it off the end. Now I have half an onion. Put that right here. We'll repeat the same thing on the other half. Grab that first layer of skin, and it should come off really easy after you cut it in half. And there you go, another half of an onion. From here, obviously clean up, make sure you throw out all of the excess skin and little fibers that are kind of hanging around after the fact. Okay, now we have our 2 cleaned onion halves. If you're not comfortable using a knife, at this point, you could just go ahead and take this root end off and then use that little box chopper. I know Cameron has one, so if you have that little box chopper, what I would recommend, cut this root off and then throw this whole half in that little slot on the box chopper and just chop it that way. But if you want to learn how to cut an onion, one way that we would do this is first we're going to start by making basically lines this way across the onion. But what we want to avoid is cutting all the way through it, right? So we're going to make little cuts almost all the way up to the edge where they're still barely hanging on. And again, keep in mind that root is there and it's doing its job right now. It's keeping the entire onion held together. You can sort of think of it like the onion's hair tie a little bit. It's keeping everything together. And we're just cutting some sections here all the way across the onion. Now if I pick it up and show you, I've done vertical sections all the way across the onion. From here, some people like to do another cut this way. So if like we were to pick it up and cut into it in half, we don't have to do that. From here, it's literally just you chop down the onion. And since the onions have layers, all of those little cuts and sections are going to separate naturally on their own. And when you start getting to the very end of it, you're just basically going to have that root section left. And this, just the last little butt end of the onion, is what you can kind of get rid of. I'm going to take just a little bit more off of this guy because I still think he has some more to give. And now that's what's left. You're going to repeat that with the other half. Okay, a couple little tips. When you're done cutting up your onion, it's nice to have like a little bowl on the side where you can put all the onion pieces that you need, that you're going to use in the dish, but it just kind of keeps them out of the way so that they're just not sitting on your cutting board. Another important thing to mention is going to be the order of cooking this meal. So we can't get started on any of the big cooking of the ground beef or anything else until our rice is finished. We need to have the rice at least cooled down to room temperature before we can add it into the pot with our ground beef and everything. So it's best practice to wait until your rice is ready and pull it out of your rice cooker, take it off the burner if you're cooking it in a pot, and let it cool down. So at this point, this is where you want to hold off. Your onion is prepped, you have your ground beef out, all of your other ingredients that you need, and your rice is cooking. You're going to wait to continue cooking until this is done. I will also mention, now that your rice is cooking and you're waiting for this to finish, now would also be a good time to start grating your Parmesan, because this is probably what takes the most effort in this whole meal. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to show you about how much I would use for, if we were just doing basically one serving, which is a pound of beef and a cup of rice. All right, so for the 1 cup of rice and 1 pound of ground beef, it should serve 2. I'm going to use like maybe about yay much of Parmesan. Ooh, pretty decent piece, but it's really not that much. It will seem like more once you actually grate it. Obviously, many different ways to grate cheese like this. The best is going to be a rotary grater. It'll use the least amount of muscle and sweat to get through this, but a box grater works well. And then I also love, where is it? This guy works really well, and this is the best. It's really easy. You just got to be very careful when you get down to the end of it. Don't grate your fingers off. So really be aware of where your fingers are at. But now is a good time to grate up however much Parmesan you're going to use. I would say this is a normal amount for the 1-to-1 ratio. If you're making more, obviously use more, but you can measure with your heart with this. It's really about how much Parmesan you like. And that's what makes it all bind together as well and get really cheesy. So I wouldn't recommend leaving this out, but you can definitely use more than what I'm using. All right, now we have our cheese shredded. And like I said, that tiny little knob, since Parmesan is so dense, it's such a dense, really hard cheese, when you grate it, it ends up looking like a lot more than what you started with. So that's about how much you could expect if you're using the same amount of Parmesan as me. And then I also recommend keeping the Parmesan around with the grater, because at the end, you might want to grate some extra on top as sort of like garnish, just a little extra Parmesan to go on top of the dish. It's really good, I recommend that. But now we have onions, Parmesan prepped, ready to go. At this point, from here on, it's pretty much all just cooking, and the cooking part is really easy. Okay, rice timer went off 2 minutes ago. Now if we take a look, we have literally perfectly cooked rice. It's nice and steamy. What I'm gonna do, take a little towel, always protect your hands. This is gonna be super hot. We're gonna take it out of the cooker. It's gonna be, oh, okay, hold on. Grab one of these guys, set them down here, leave it. Let it sit, let it cool down, let it steam off a little bit. And now we're completely done with the rice cooker. So we can turn this off and unplug it from the wall, and this can be moved at this point. Now what we're gonna do, I brought out my Lodge cast iron for this, is we're gonna start cooking. So for pretty much all of the elements of this, we're starting with our burner at about medium high. I actually put it, it's kind of funny, right between 6 and 7. And we're gonna let this preheat a little bit. Let it sit, leave it about 3 minutes. A good thing to do is to add a little bit of oil at this point. Not olive oil. Do not cook with olive oil. It's not for cooking. Avocado oil is a really good option for this. Vegetable oil, not as good for you, but definitely an option for this. You can also use beef tallow if you want. We have some tallow up here. It is meant for cooking, so you can cook with beef tallow. We're already gonna have a lot of beefy flavor in this, so we're not gonna use beef tallow. I'm also just gonna use a couple sprays of this down at the bottom, just like that. We're gonna let it get hot. At this point, probably a good time to prep this. Just get it out of the container onto a plate, and then you're gonna dab it with some paper towels. You want it to be not super dry, but you don't want it to be wet, if that makes sense. All right, so I've got my plate here. My ground beef package is open, and I have a paper towel on top of the plate. I'm gonna flip out the ground beef. It's got some gross juices inside of the bag. That's why the paper towels, obviously, we don't need any of those extra juices. I'm gonna now take this, toss it. We're gonna make sure this whole thing is sitting on the plate, and then I'm just gonna rip another couple paper towels off. I'm gonna pat this down. I just wanna soak up, and you'll see it too. I wanna soak up any of those extra kind of gross juices that are sitting on top of the meat. They package it in a little bit of, it's like a little bit of saline or salty water, basically, just for freshness. We don't need that stuff. It draws out a lot of the hemoglobin. It's not blood, but there are red blood cells in it. It's hemoglobin. That's why it looks like that. That's why the meat is pink. But we want to dry some of that off. It's also going to make it way easier for us to get a better sear inside of the pan. All right, our beef is prepped. Our pan is preheating. It's almost there. Now I'm going to show you what utensils you're going to need. You will need a nice spoon of some sort. This comes in handy towards the second half of the cooking. The first half of the cooking, while we're doing the ground beef, you're going to want your ground beef masher. This is going to make it really easy to get little pieces of ground beef rather than just giant chunks. Another thing, we are going to be taking the ground beef out of the pan once we're done cooking it so that we can saute the onions. So you want to be prepared for that. What I recommend is grabbing a bowl of some sort, something about yay big, just where we can throw our ground beef in when it's done cooking. It's always nice to have these things set out ahead of time so that you're not like scrambling, nothing is overcooking. But at this point, I think we can start adding our beef in. And when I add ground beef in, I typically like kind of break it up with my hand and I go piece by piece. So just like that. Grab another good section. We're gonna go piece by piece. The reason we let the pan preheat, you're hearing it right now, is that when the beef makes contact with the pan, we're getting a sizzle, a sear, and it's not just gonna sit down there, come up to temperature with the pan, and effectively steam. But we don't want gray steamed meat. We want it to be nice charred, get some nice browning on it. Now when I've filled in pretty much all of the areas of the pan, remember to turn on your vent hood, so I'm gonna do that now. I got it on high. What we're gonna do now is pretty much just let it sit. What I'll do a little bit is I'm gonna flatten out these pieces just a tad so that they're making really good contact with the bottom of the pan. But after flattening them out, let it sit. Let it cook, let it form a little bit of a crust. Don't do anything to it yet. I will come back and show you when you're actually gonna wanna start breaking this up. Just for a good reference too, all of this smoke that you're seeing come off right now, it's actually not smoke, that's steam, because the meat has a lot of moisture in it. And once that moisture is gone, that's when we actually start to get good browning and a good sear on the meat. So in the beginning, it's gonna look a little bit intimidating and kind of scary, like everything's burning. It's not burning, it is literally steaming off all of that excess moisture in the beginning. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back and it's not gonna be steaming as much. That's when we're gonna start mashing it up and getting a really good mash on that meat. All right, when your meat gets to this state, this is when you're gonna start mashing it up and mixing it around. And I'm gonna get in there, don't be afraid to use a little bit of force. And you're gonna break all this up. You'll also notice at this point, there has been no seasoning that's gone in here. The reason you hold off on the seasoning is because when the meat is not cooked yet, if you add a bunch of salt or seasoning to it, it'll release a lot of its extra moisture, and your whole pan is going to be like swimming in beef juices, which is not something you want to do. So we'll season after the fact, once it's already cooked. And I will come back and show you that step once I'm done mashing here. All right, at this point, you can see I've gotten the beef to a really nice, manageable, crumbly texture. From here, I'll go ahead and grab my seasoning. I'll unscrew this with one hand. There we go. I'm gonna add a little bit in now. So give yourself a good shake of it in here. That's probably good for now. And then we can mix this right up. And at this point, what we're gonna do, we're gonna lower this heat down to medium, and we're ready to start taking this beef out. So you're gonna scoop it piece by piece. It's gonna take a little bit of time. And you're gonna put it into that bowl that you have reserved to the side. All right, at this point, I've got pretty much all the beef out of the pan. You see it left behind some really yummy charred on bits on the bottom. That is what we're gonna leave that in the pan. We're actually gonna cook that down and deglaze it using the onions and our stock, which is over here. So what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna bring all of the relevant things over, because this is what we're gonna be cooking with next. We have our garlic, our onions, and our stock. And you'll see all of our beef is over here in this bowl, and it's just gonna hang out over to the side for a little bit. At this point, the heat has been lowered down. I'm gonna add just a touch more of our oil in here, just a little bit, and I'm gonna go in with our onions. For the onions, you're really just gonna wanna move these around a bit. Keep them moving. Spread them out, make sure every onion is making some contact with the bottom of the pan. While you're doing it, feel free to start scraping up all the bits that are left on the bottom of the pan. You're gonna cook these down to your liking. Some people might like to leave them a little bit more crunchy. I personally like getting them nice and a little bit caramelized, kind of gold. Sort of think In-N-Out texture for the onions. And your house is actually gonna start smelling a lot like In-N-Out at this point. You're gonna be smelling all of that beef fat cooking in onions. It's really gonna start smelling like In-N-Out. I'm gonna show you at what point next that we're actually gonna add the garlic. All right, that took a few minutes. Now my onions are pretty much to a spot that I like them. We're gonna do two things. First of which, we're gonna put a little bit of garlic in, maybe about this much. I'm gonna throw that in. Actually, three things. We're gonna add more seasoning to the onions. And finally, we're gonna add a little bit more oil. We wanna get it like right on top of the garlic too. At this point, we're going to saute these for about 30 more seconds, and that is it. 30 more seconds. We only want the garlic to cook for about 30 seconds-ish. Just enough to soften it and to take off some of the harshness. And I'm kind of counting down in my head here. I'm also watching my little timer. Still got some more time to go. And you'll notice I've still been developing a pretty good, it's called a fond, which is all of this brown stuff on the bottom of the pan. That is all flavor. All right, so we're cooking through all of this. I think we've hit that 30 seconds. At that point, I'm gonna go in with my stock. So with the stock here, well, we have about a cup that we're gonna go in with, and we can adjust throughout. But the primary goal of this is to start deglazing the bottom of the pot. So once that stock goes in, I want you to really start scraping up everything that's on the bottom of this pan, scrape around all the edges. It's doing two things at once. The first thing that it's doing is it's cleaning the bottom of this pan, but the second thing it's doing is it's incorporating all of that cooked in flavor into your onions, your garlic, pretty much everything that's in this pot. At this point, we kind of want to bring this up to a simmer and let it reduce a little bit naturally. So I'm gonna turn the heat up just a tad, and we're gonna keep scraping off the bottom of that pot. We're gonna keep going. You'll see it in real time. It's starting to steam, and we're gonna see a simmer start happening. Really scraping up the bottom of that pot. It's starting to smell really good right now. We're gonna let it sit, and you're gonna see it actively come up to a simmer, and that basically means that it's gonna start bubbling. It's basically a boil. You can see it's starting to happen now. It does go quick, because this is not a lot of liquid in there. So it is starting to simmer. We can see that now. And once we reach a pretty good simmer, I'll push the pot back just a little bit so it's fully on the burner. Once we reach a pretty good simmer, at this point, we can go ahead and add our beef back in that's been kind of chilling over here to the side. So now that it's simmering, ooh, my beef is going back in. Don't want to waste all the juices that are still in this little bowl here. And now at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna incorporate. We're gonna mix all of this together, all of the beef and onions and the stock, and the beef is gonna absorb a lot of these juices, a lot of the flavor. It's looking pretty good. Our next step is gonna be adding our rice, but we are gonna let this simmer down just a little bit while we go prep our rice to get put in here. So at this point, we've reached our pretty good simmer. I'm gonna turn our heat back down to medium, let it simmer away for a little bit. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna come over here and get our rice. So this bowl has been cooling down for a while now, still a little bit warm, but I can touch it, I can handle it, not a big deal. I'm gonna bring this whole situation over here and bring it close to our pot. And I'm gonna grab a utensil to help me get the rice out. You know what, actually, I'm just gonna use the spoon we've been using. So at this point, we can start adding our rice in bit by bit. So here's our first little scoop of rice going in, and we're just gonna keep scooping our rice in, just like that. Grab some more rice, putting it in the pot. Come over here, grab a little bit more rice in the pot. Then we just have a little bit more rice. We're gonna grab that into the pot, and we're just gonna lightly break it up and let it steam through as all that stock is steaming the beef, the onions. Just gonna lightly break it up. Alrighty. Okay, at this point, we have all of our rice in the pot, all of our beef is in there, our onions, our garlic, a little bit of our stock. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the heat down to low, and we're gonna start folding all of this together. It's really not too big of a deal, super easy to do. We're just gonna incorporate everything into itself so that it's evenly distributed. We have rice and we have beef in basically every bite. If you see some big chunks of rice, go ahead and break those up. And you're gonna wanna fold everything together. Got another big chunk over here, but just keep folding. I come around the edges and I scoop it over to the top. And we're gonna fold all of this together. Okay, now if we take a look, we're at a pretty familiar consistency here. We have our rice pretty evenly spread, our onions and our beef, everything is incorporated together. Make sure you're also scraping down the sides of your pot, just so that everything is getting mixed, nothing's being left out. At this point, we're pretty good. I don't think I'm gonna add any more stock. I like the consistency that we have right now. Everything's holding together. It looks nice and moist. So at this point, we're gonna turn the heat all the way off, and we're gonna pull this pot off of the burner. You can bring it to an adjacent burner. You can put it on your counter on top of a trivet or a towel. What I'm gonna do for the sake of filming is I'm gonna bring it over here and I'm gonna put it on top of this towel. So to do so, I'm gonna grab a little oven mitt. Be careful because these cast iron pots conduct heat very, very well. So it will be hot. This whole pot is gonna be very, very hot, even the handles. So I'm gonna get it nice and on top of one of my trivets. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab our lid. So I have our lid, we have our pot full of our beef and rice. Now we have our Parmesan. So at this point, we're off the heat. There's no more heat being conducted into this pan. We can add our cheese. And I like to kind of just pour it all right over the top. And we're gonna do the same thing as with the rice. We're just gonna gently fold everything together. We're gonna fold it. I wanna make sure our cheese is evenly distributed and incorporated. And you'll notice while you start to do this, the cheese is melting. It's bringing everything together. We're getting a good consistency out of the rice and the beef. And you'll see it wants to hold its shape a lot more, especially after adding the cheese. It's gonna really wanna hold its shape. Cheese almost acts like the glue for this dish. It's kind of a binder. But once we have it pretty evenly distributed here, you'll see I can grab a really good scoop and it's not really going anywhere. And this is exactly what we're looking for. So at this point, to keep warm and to let all of that Parmesan sort of melt its way through everything, we can cover it up and we can let it sit for about 5 minutes. And after that 5 minutes is up, this is ready to serve and to eat. You can add whatever sort of sauces that you want on top. If you want to use the Mexican crema, that works really good. Tabasco is awesome with this. I know you guys aren't really spice people, but it goes really, really well. Anything you can imagine, chimichurri, all of it works really good with this dish. But that is how you make my grandma's beef and rice. Here is the finished product in a bowl, ready to be eaten. You can use a spoon or a fork, holds together really well. It is not dog friendly because it has onions and garlic, so keep that in mind.
I'm ready. I'm
there
so
it is.
excited.